guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to continue on with our read-along of Ha. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 104, Shizun's Wontons. A single lantern wandered through Sisheng Peak, looking for that fragment of returned soul. Once the soul-calling lantern was lit, Moran became invisible to the living. It was as if he had also turned into half a ghost, as he climbed the blue stone steps and traversed the stoas and balconies, searching. Red Lotus Pavilion, Frost Sky Hall, 3 Lives platform. He had looked everywhere, but he couldn't find him. Moran couldn't help thinking that maybe Shizun had already grown weary in life and no longer wished to see him in death. The thought made his blood run cold. His footsteps picked up, the hem of his robe sweeping past the wild grass underfoot, when suddenly he noticed a person standing at the end of Naihei Bridge, cold and aloof, woeful and forlorn. The palms of his hands immediately began to sweat, and his heartbeats were loud like a drum in his ears as he ran toward that person. Shizun! But the face that turned around belonged to a soul he didn't recognize, probably a disciple that had perished during the heavenly rift that day. The half of his face that was visible was covered in blood, and the eyes that stared at Moran were dull and confused. Sorry, wrong person! Moran stammered and hurried past him. That soul had lost its cognition, only stiffly watching Moran pass by in front of him without making a single move. The corpse-pale body stood frozen in place, like a shell that had been shed and left behind in this world. Moran felt his chest tighten even more. What should he do if Shizun's human soul was also like that, a walking corpse? Even if he were to find him, would he be able to watch over him until daybreak? His heart beat like a frenzied stampede as his feet moved faster and faster. He didn't know how he ended up here, but he looked up to find himself outside Mengpo Hall. Moran thought to himself that Shizun didn't particularly care for food, so his returned soul probably wouldn't come to this of all places. He was just about to turn and leave when a soft sigh came from inside Mengpo Hall. That voice was so quiet, but it sounded like an explosion of thunder in Moran's head. He practically stumbled through the doors, and his hands shook uncontrollably as he lifted the soul-calling lantern. The light of that lantern was like a newly risen sun, warm yet mild, as it illuminated a white-robed figure. His joints turned white as his nails dug into his palm. Moran murmured, Shizun! That fragment of Chuanning's soul stood all alone in the emptiness of the large kitchen. His silhouette looked a little washed out, like ink blanched by the passage of time, but it was definitely him. He wore the same white robes made of frozen mist silk that he had when he died, its hem stained red with blood. The conspicuous vividness made his skin look even paler, almost see-through like the color of smoke and mist, looking as if he might disappear in a gust of wind. With lantern in hand, Moran gazed at the mirage before his eyes, like the image of flowers in a mirror, like the reflection of the moon in water. He wanted to walk faster, afraid that he might leave if he delayed. He wanted to walk slower, afraid that the dream might shatter if he rushed. 1,000 thoughts twisted together in his mind. Regret and guilt flooded his chest, and the rims of his eyes grew faintly red. He felt only that he owed him far too much as his footsteps slowed to a stop in his vicinity, too ashamed to show his face. The lantern swayed gently. Now that he was closer, he could see that Chuanning was busying about, seeming a little anxious about something, but also rather clumsy. What was he doing? He moved to stand behind him, thinking to help the pitiful soul out, but what he saw struck him like lightning, and then, as the shock began to taper off, a burst of agonizing pain opened its bloody maw and tore viciously into his neck. Moran recoiled backward 2 steps, slowly shaking his head, but unable to speak. In that moment, even if his chest were to be torn open and his heart ripped out, veins, flesh and all, it could not hurt as much as this. He saw Chuanning's hands, raw and bloody from crawling up more than 3,000 steps carrying him when he was still alive. He saw those hands slowly feeling along the table. On that table sat flour, seasoning, and mincemeat filling. And next to the table was a pot heating up water. The water was already boiling, but Chuanning, the dummy, didn't even know to lower the flames a little, and the thick covering of steam made everything look hazy and blurry. Or perhaps it wasn't the steam blurring Moran's vision at all, but the wetness in his eyes. Chuanning's human soul was slowly folding wonton wrappers. His hands were originally nimble and dexterous, countless armaments having been crafted by those slender fingers, immense barriers having been conjured between those palms. But right now, those hands were torn and marred, trembling slightly as they carefully folded one full plump wonton after another. ... Moran lifted an arm and wiped his reddened eyes, but still couldn't force out so much as a single word. Chuanning stood with his back facing him. He seemed to finally remember that the water had been boiling for quite a while already, and, worried that it would all boil off if left alone like that, went to look for the pot. He felt around with his hands. Yes, he felt around with his hands. Moran finally woke up from the anguish he had been drowning in and went around to Shizun's side with hasty steps. He could see clearly now. When the three souls split, each loses something. Maybe memories, maybe cognition, or maybe parts of its body. What this soul had lost was a part of its perception. This portion of Chuanning's soul, returned from the underworld, could see only blurriness. His hearing seemed to be faulty as well. When he knocked something off the table, he couldn't even tell where it landed. But even so, he still tried his best to make this bowl of ordinary, unremarkable wontons, as if this had been his favorite thing to do in life, as if he found comfort in this haze of steam. Watching this, Moran felt like his heart might burst from the pain, felt like the world was spinning dizzily around him, and for a moment he couldn't even think, only standing there frozen in place, watching the scene before his eyes. Clang! Due to the diminished vision, the soul really couldn't see too well, and accidentally knocked over Mengpo Hall's salt jar. Chuanning seemed startled, silently drawing his hand back, an uneasy expression appearing on his blood-stained face. "What do you need?" A hoarse voice spoke from next to him, tight with choked-back sobs, shattered with guilt. "Let me help you, okay?" Chuanning seemed a bit surprised, but maybe because his soul was incomplete and so his emotions couldn't be too turbulent, he soon settled back into an even calmness. But every word Moran forced past his lips was difficult and full of pleading. "Shizun, let me help you, okay?" Water boiled in the pot. In this kitchen, the dead was warm and lively, but the living was distraught and listless. A long while passed before he finally heard Chuanning's familiar voice, low and even like the shattering of jade and the crumbling of mountains. "You're here?" "Yes." "That's good. Just wait at the side for a bit. Once the wontons are done cooking, bring a bowl to Moran." Moran froze, not understanding what Chuanning was saying at all. He watched as Chuanning, feeling around blindly, put the plump, snow-white wontons one by one into the pot, his face losing its usual sternness in the haziness of steam, looking very gentle instead. He said, "I punished him too harshly yesterday. He probably hates me now. I heard Shremung say he's not eating anything, so when you go to deliver this to him, don't tell him I made it. He won't eat it if he knows." Moran's head was a complete mess, as if some secret that had been sleeping for half a lifetime was beginning to stir, was just about to break out of the ground. "Shizun!" Chuanning forced a smile. "I'm afraid I was too strict with him, but that rashness of his really should be tempered. Never mind. Get a bowl for me, a thick one if you can. It's cold outside. Have to keep the food warm." Just about to break out of the ground, just about to break out of the ground. It was as if he could hear the faint sound of something shattering in his mind, and a certain memory finally clawed through its shell, screeching like a ghost as it burst forth and hurtled toward him. All of a sudden, everything went dark. Wontons. Shimei. Shizun. That was the first time he'd had Shimei's wontons. That day, he had mistakenly plucked the precious flower Madame Wang had been growing and got punished by Chuanning for it. Tianwen had whipped him bloody and turned his heart into ash. He had lain in bed refusing to get up, brooding that he had plucked the flower because he wanted to give it to Shizun, only to get a round of merciless lashing instead. He thought that he must have been blind to have been taken to Chuanning, that his heart must have been covered in lard to think that Chuanning was gentle, that Chuanning cared about him. That was the day when Shimei had come to his room holding a bowl of steamy wontons and chili oil. That soft voice, that gentle tone, and that warm bowl of wontons turned all of his disappointment in Shizun into fondness for Shumei. But who could have known? But who could have known? That fragment of returned soul stood there next to him. Every deceased person's human soul was different when it returned. Some were like Lo Xianxian, coming back to see what happened after their death. Some were like that person at Naihei Bridge earlier, without any lingering cares or worries, simply wandering around the place where they lived in a stupor. Chuaning's human soul had lost its vision, couldn't tell voices apart, and didn't even know which day it was. He came back to the world of the living probably because he felt that he had done something wrong, made a mistake, and felt bad about it, wanted to make up for it. And so, in the end, Chuaning made a decision different from that in life. He scooped the wontons out and put them in the bowl. The chopped scallions were a jade green, the broth was a milky white, and the chili oil poured on top, red and spicy. He went to hand the bowl over to Shumei, but paused suddenly at the last moment. I really was too unkind to him, Chuaning murmured. A few moments passed in silence. Never mind, you don't have to deliver it anymore. I'll go see him myself and apologize to him. Moran stared blankly, his face ghostly pale. He had always thought that Shizun was too cold, cold like iron, so cold it froze his heart into ice. He never would have guessed that Shizun was actually kind to him, that his lingering regret in the living world was him, and to apologize to him. The ice melted, turned into water, became an ocean. Slowly, Moran lifted his hands and buried his face in them. His shoulders trembled slightly. A heart like iron, that wasn't it. Moran's throat felt tight, and a sob escaped as he fell to the ground, kneeling before the soul that couldn't see him. The soul-calling lantern sat on the ground by his feet as he let out a broken wail, screamed himself hoarse as if he might cry blood, and finally, unable to hold it in any longer, he bawled, loudly and miserably. He knelt before Chuaning. That wasn't it! He groveled in the dust, clutching at the hems of Chuaning's blood-stained robes. It wasn't that your heart was cold and hard as iron. It wasn't that I was unyielding and immovable as a rock. It was just that I misjudged in the past, misunderstood you too much. It was just that... Shizun! He wept, curling in on himself. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please come back with me. Shizun, please come back with me. I was wrong. It was my fault. I don't blame you. I don't hate you. It was my fault, always making you angry. If you hit me or scold me in the future, I definitely won't fight back. Shizun, if you just come back, I'll listen to everything you say. I'll respect you. I'll cherish you. I'll treat you right. But Chuaning's robes were gossamer thin, as if they might shatter at any moment in his hands. Moran wished he could cut open his own chest and give him his heart, just to hear his heartbeat again. He wished he could drain his own blood to fill his veins, just to see color on his face again. He would do anything to make up for his mistakes. Shizun, his voice broke. Let's start over from the beginning, okay? In front of the heaven-piercing tower, under that high-tang tree, the Zhongshu, gentle as a white cat, lifted his head, phoenix eyes widening slightly. The cicadas on the branches chirped 2-3 times, and the youth before him grinned brightly. Xianjun, I've been watching you for so long already. Why won't you pay attention to me? In the blink of an eye, it had been 20 years, 2 lifetimes, all in the past already. It was greedy and shameless, but he said it anyway. Shizun, let's start over from the beginning, okay? Please, pay attention to me, won't you? End of chapter. Author's notes. Wonton June has used a special method to come online. Congratulations to those who guessed it right. Xie Meatbun, thank you for finally revealing the truth. Okay, so to recap chapter 104, we finally get the truth behind the dumplings, the wontons. It wasn't Shumei who made them, it was Chuaning himself. But Chuaning was too embarrassed to give it to Moran because he beat him up before, so he had Shumei give it to him. So this is all one big misunderstanding. The whole reason why Moran ended up liking Shumei was because Shumei gave him the wontons, but those wontons were from Chuaning, not Shumei. My gosh, all because of one misunderstanding. Oh my gosh, poor Chuaning. And even in death, his soul can't rest because he wanted to make up with Moran before dying. And Moran here just realized he done effed up real bad. He was really, really bad to his Shizun. Oh my god, how is he gonna make it up to him? He better treat Chuaning right, definitely really, really well in the next life, okay? No smack talk, back talk. Whatever Chuaning wants, he gets. You better bow down and kiss his feet, okay, Moran? Oh no. But this is definitely going to change the dynamic between Moran and Shimei now that Moran knows that it was Chuaning that made him the dumplings. I don't know if he'll still like Shimei the way he has. And I bet Shimei will notice this change in affections as well. We'll probably see it coming up soon. Did you guys expect this? Did you guys suspect this? For those who didn't know or hadn't read farther than this, did you expect Chuaning to be the culprit behind the wontons? Yeah. And, oh my gosh. Okay, let's keep going, guys. Let's read one more chapter. Chapter 105, Shizun's Human Soul. Okay, warning, light gore. Prepare yourself, guys. A little bit of knives here. The lamp cast its bright light on a pair of people. They weren't at Mengpo Hall anymore, but in Moran's room. Chuaning couldn't see the road clearly, so Moran had led him by the hand. Chuaning was short 2 souls, unable to tell what day it was, or even whose hand was holding his, only dazedly allowing the other to lead him along. Moran led him into the room, wiped the tears from his face, and closed the door behind him. Oh, Moran is holding Chuaning's hand, but Chuaning is blind, so he doesn't know it's Moran. He thinks it's Shimei that's guiding him along. Chuaning set down the bowl of wontons he was holding. Then, feeling around, he went to the bed and asked softly, "Moran is still asleep?" ... There was no response, so Chuaning assumed that Moran was indeed still asleep. He sighed and seemed a little disappointed. Moran couldn't bear it, and was also afraid he might leave, so he sat on the bed and said, "Shizun, I'm awake!" Hearing him call for himself, Chuaning's brows moved slightly and he but then seemed hesitant and said nothing else. Moran knew he had a thin face and would probably try to leave again after just a couple of words if he thought Shimei was here, so he picked up a hair clasp from the table and tossed it at the door to make it sound like Shimei had closed the door and left. Then asked, "Why is Shizun here? Who brought you here?" Sure enough, Chuaning with only half his soul was much easier to fool than usual. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Shi Mingjing took me here. Did he leave?" "He left." A moment passed in silence before Chuaning finally said, "The wound on your back." "The wound on my back is not Shizun's fault," Moran said in a soft voice. "I picked a precious herb without permission. Shizun's punishment was well deserved." Not having expected him to say anything like that, Chuaning was slightly taken aback. Then his delicate, curtain-like lashes quivered minutely as he sighed. "Does it still hurt?" "It doesn't hurt anymore." Chuaning lifted his head, those ice-cold fingertips seeking until they touched Moran's face, and then, a moment later, "Sorry, please don't hate Shizun." He never would have spoken such soft words back then, but in death, thinking back to things as his soul drifted in the underworld, he found that he didn't regret anything other than how unkind he had been to his disciple. And so, given the second chance, these words that were once impossible to say came out so easily. Moran felt like a warm spring water was streaming over his heart. The hatred that remained after his rebirth, the old scars that refused to fade year after year, the unwillingness to accept things that was already on its last breath, all of it had already been shattered into pieces, and now they were washed away by these heartfelt words of apology, leaving nothing behind. How is Moran gonna cope now that he knows the truth? How is he gonna come to terms with what his past self did, what 0.5 Moran did, what Taxian Jun did? Like, knowing that Shizun did absolutely nothing wrong, how is Moran gonna justify or even come to terms or reflect on what his past self did to Chuaning, thinking that he was his mortal enemy, when in actuality, Chuaning did nothing but care about him in his own way? In the light of the soul-calling lantern, he gazed at his Shizun's face. He couldn't see the bloodstains anymore, and there seemed to be a whiff of life again in the paleness there. It was as if he was peering across all the time that could never turn back, and seeing Chuanning's gentle countenance from the first time he saw him. Unconsciously, Moran lifted a hand to cover Chuanning's ice-cold hand with his own warm one. "I don't hate you," he said. "Shizun, you're good to me. I don't hate you." Chuanning stared blankly for a moment, then suddenly smiled. Even though he was dead, even with blood and dirt on his face, his smile was still the first melt of a frozen-over stream, filling the entire room with the warmth of spring. His eyes were closed, but there seemed to be something glistening between his lashes. It was the bright, brilliant smile of one whose final wish had been granted, proud yet reserved, radiant yet humble, like the blossoming of the most luxuriant and steadfast high-tongued tree. Countless blossoms of gentle, faint blushes carefully dotting the dignified branches, beautiful and sweet-scented, covering the leaves like so many stars. Moran couldn't help losing himself in the sight. This was the first time in 2 lifetimes that he had seen Chuanning with such an easy and happy expression. Moran wasn't smart. He thought of the saying, "a flower-like smile," but deemed it unfitting. Then he thought of a smile of 100 charms, but that seemed even more absurd. He racked his brains, but just couldn't think of a way to describe this lovely vision before him. All he could do was sigh with feeling. How beautiful. Such a beautiful person. How did he never notice before? Struck by a sudden, fortuitous inspiration, Moran said in a soft voice, "Shizun, there's something I want to tell you." "I really didn't know how valuable Madame Wang's high-tongue flower was. When I picked it that day, it was because I wanted to give it to you." Chuanning seemed surprised. Moran's voice grew even softer, a little bashful, even a little helpless as he repeated, "It was for you." "But why would you pick that flower for me?" Moran's face flushed despite himself. I don't know either. I just thought it was really pretty. He didn't continue, vaguely surprised to find that he was somehow still remembered how he had felt so long ago when picking that flower for Chuanning. Chuanning without his other 2 souls was really so gentle, like a cat without its claws, all soft, docile belly and snowy rounded paws. He pat Moran's head and smiled as he said, "Dummy." Moran's eyes stung as he gazed up at him. He sniffled. "I'm a dummy." "Don't do that again." "I won't do it again." Moran thought about how, when he gave up hope in the past life, he had gone around doing all manners of evil and terrorizing people, angering Chuanning until his Shizun finally gave up on him and tossed him that verdict that he had resented for an entire lifetime. Deficient by nature, beyond remedy. 100 emotions welled up in his chest as he said, "Shizun, I promise you, from now on I won't do anything to disappoint you. I'll be good, I won't be bad." He was hardly well-read and didn't have any powerfully resounding words of promise to say, but he could feel the hot blood boiling in his chest as that pure and simple soul that he once had as a child finally seemed to stir from its slumber. "Shizun, this disciple is slow-witted and didn't realize until now how good you have been to me." His eyes were bright as he got up from the bed and knelt before Chuanning, bowing down low. And when he lifted his head, the young man's expression was solemn and serious. "So, from now on, Moran won't bring you any disgrace ever again." Sitting side by side, the master and disciple had a long talk, though Moran did most of the talking. He was actually very cute when he set his mind on cherishing someone. Chuanning listened quietly, now and again shaking his head with a smile. Before they knew it, the skies outside the window gradually began to brighten, like the rich darkness of Huizhou ink being watered down. The long night was coming to an end. Master Huizhou stood by the stone bridge, the hems of his monk robes wet from splashes of the water rushing past, but he seemed not to notice at all as he waited silently. The sun rose slowly from the east, its light passing through the leaves of trees to strike the turbulent waters of the yellow springs, instantly turning the racing currents a dazzling gold, the water spray sparkling like the delicate scales of a dragon, and light reflecting brilliantly where the flow billowed into waves, glistening and resplendent. He was currently in the void realm, visible only to the one who finds Chuanning's soul. Shinmei and Shuemeng had both come by already, but neither could see the old monk by the bank. He was calm by all appearances, but his hand thumbing a string of prayer beads unconsciously moved faster and more urgently with each passing moment. Clatter! Abruptly, the coils of prayer beads fell apart, the star moon Bodhi beads dropping like rain all over the ground. Huaizui's eyes flew open and he pressed his lips together, color draining from his face. It was an ill omen. He stroked the broken string of the prayer beads, watching the rolling waves toss stray beads back onto the shore, and beads on the shore rolling into the waters. He stared blankly for a long while, face slowly growing paler. "Great Master!" Someone suddenly called out to him. "Great Master!" Excitedly, exuberantly. Huaizui looked immediately toward the source of the sound to see Moran sprinting over from the distance, holding a soul-calling lantern that flowed with both a scarlet light and a golden one. The first rays of dawn were already dazzling enough, but this young man's eyes were even brighter than the morning sun, gleaming like a pair of crystals. He screeched to a halt in front of Huaizui, cheeks flushed and panting slightly, but uncontrollably excited. "I found him!" Moran brushed aside his disheveled bangs, that lantern holding Chuanning's human soul tucked snugly against his chest. "He wasn't unwilling to see me. He's in here!" He pointed at the lantern in his arm, but then hesitated, wanting to hand it over to Huaizui, but also loath to part with it, his hands extending out only a couple of inches before drawing back in again. Huaizui let out a subtle sigh of relief and looked him up and down, then said with a laugh, "Since you're the one who found him, you can hold him. No need to give it to me." So, very carefully, Moran continued holding the lantern. Huaizui picked up the monk staff leaning against the tree, tapped it lightly against the water, and a jade green bamboo raft with a white cord tied to its curved bow appeared out of nowhere. "There's no time to lose. Please board." It was common knowledge that Sisheng Peak's river connected to the ghost realm, but since there was a barrier in between, going to the underworld wasn't just a simple matter of flowing along the waters. Master Huaizui's bamboo raft was enchanted to allow it to pass between the yin and the yang, so after half a day and many miles of Moran sitting alone on the raft sailing the currents, he came upon a waterfall. The waterfall to the underworld. This waterfall connected to the infinite cosmos above and the deepest reaches of hell below, with no defined boundaries and neither beginning nor end. The watery curtain came down in a cascade, the spray of droplets giving rise to a foggy mist. Before Moran could even get a closer look, the bamboo raft was already carrying him straight toward that enormous curtain of water the size of prehistoric beasts. He didn't even have time to react when powerful streams of water were already immediate, like countless blades poised to tear right through flesh and bone. "Shizun!" In the midst of danger, the only thing Moran cared about was the soul-calling lantern in his arms. He held the lantern tightly against himself to shield it, never once letting go, even as he was drawn into a raging whirlpool and everything was dark, stormy chaos. He didn't know how long had passed when the deafening sound of the waterfall abruptly vanished, and the barrage of knives-like deluge disappeared as well. Moran opened his eyes slowly, only letting out a breath of relief when he checked that the soul-calling lantern was safe and sound. But then he looked up and was stunned speechless by the sight before him. That waterfall traversing the realms of yin and yang was nowhere to be seen, and the bamboo raft was drifting gently on a vast lake with tranquil waters. The lake was of deep blue that flowed with specks of starlight, and countless wisps of faint souls swam through its waters like shoals of fish. Reeds flourished along both its shores, with faintly glowing flowers that drifted to and fro in the draft. From the left side and the right, in the depths of the reeds, came the singing voices of a man and a woman, the notes wafting as if from a dream, sorrowful yet serene. My body into the thunderous abyss, limbs ground into paste, my skull into the open world, eye sockets withered into dust, scarlet ants devour my heart, and vultures my innards, only the soul remains, only the soul remains. Green waters of the yellow springs flow east, passed by gone, never to return. Moran continued drifting on the bamboo raft for a long time, and then, suddenly, a great gateway that towered into the black sky appeared in the heavy darkness of night. Once closer, he could see that the enormous gateway was grand and majestic, with fine details that were splendid and exquisite. It was like a vile beast of gold and jade, covered in honey and decorated with pearls, that had been crouching in the darkness with its bloody, putrid-smelling maw wide open since time immemorial, as untold numbers of lonely souls and lost ghosts wandered into its stomach. Even closer, the sinister turrets looked like fangs that could pierce the sun, and the whole structure seemed like the imposing head of a massive beast lying in wait for all the grievances of the world. Even closer, and the piece of Chuanning's soul in the lantern seemed nervous, its golden glow pulsing in brightness and swaying slightly. "It's all right!" Moran sensed his unease and hugged the lantern closer, leaning in until his lips were nearly touching the paper to whisper soothing words as he channeled in more of his spiritual energy to keep him company. "Shizun, don't be afraid! I'm here!" The light quivered for a moment, then settled back down. Lowering his thick lashes, Moran peeked into the lantern and couldn't help the chuckle that escaped. He reached out and caressed the edge of the lantern, then hugged it even closer. In the pitch-black night, the words Ghost Gate were right, large, and bold, strikingly vivid as if newly written in the fresh blood of the living. The bamboo raft reached the shore, and Moran set foot on the road to the underworld, the very ground saturated with the smell of blood. As he walked on, there were more and more people around him, men and women, old and young, even wailing infants that had died soon after birth, all of them drifting toward the inner reaches of the underworld. No matter if they were emperors, generals, or ministers in life with riches and splendors unbound, or commoners and peasants with not a penny to their names, no matter how much money or things they had been buried with. In this time, in this place, all must travel this final road alone. Moran followed the swarming crowd of souls to the entrance of the ghost realm. There was a person sitting there fanning himself with a palm leaf fan, probably a soldier, judging by his clothes. His stomach had been cut open when he died, and his intestines slid out from time to time. The gatekeeper used the handle of the fan to shove his intestines back in with an air of impatience, then looked up lazily to interrogate the newly deceased soul. "What's your name?" "Sun Wu." "How'd you die?" I died of old age." So the gatekeeper picked up a big stamp and carelessly stamped an underworld entry pass with "Died of old age" before handing it to Sun Wu. "Don't lose it or you'll have to go to 17th Hall to apply for a replacement. You can go. Next." Sun Wu was extremely nervous. To be fair, every newly dead person, regardless of how valiant or knowledgeable in life, would probably be nervous. Am I gonna be put on trial? I'm a darn good person. Ain't never killed no chicken in my life. Just wondered if can maybe get a better lot next life. At least have enough money to get me a wifey." The old man prattled nervously, on and on without stop. The gatekeeper quickly grew sick and tired of his babbling, waving a hand as he said, "Trial? That's still a ways off. There are so many souls here in the ghost realm, it'll take at least 8 years to get through the reincarnation queue, if not 10. Just hang around and wait your turn. It's not much different here than in the living world. So save all that about chickens and wives for the Lord Judge when it gets to your turn. Next." Sun Wu was dumbfounded, stammering in a thick accent. 10 years? Not too far away in the line, Moran was shocked as well. "What? It takes that long to get judged for reincarnation?" "Of course, though it's another matter altogether for the truly reprehensible ones or the ones that have something weird going on with their souls." The gatekeeper snickered maliciously at his comment. The snicker made his intestines slip out again, and he had to stuff them back in. "The ones headed for the 18th halls never have to wait long." Moran, ... That dense half-wit Sun Wu still wanted to ask more, but the gatekeeper's patience was at an end, waving his hand and saying, go on, away with you. Everyone's waiting to get reincarnated. Don't hold up the line. Next! So, Sun Wu was driven off by the fanning of his palm leaf fan. The next one was a young woman with her pretty face all made up. She opened her mouth to speak, and the poise and coquetry unique to a certain line of work was evident in her gaze as she said in a soft voice, "My lord, this humble one is called Jinhua and was beaten to death by a brutish villain." The ghosts took their turns. Each and every one of them had their own thoughts and manners of death. All their chaotic portrayals of life were gathered here, and there were few sights more bustling and jumbled than this. But Moran only held the lantern in his arms closer to himself. He owed his Shizun. He didn't care about anything else. All he cared about was finding that last remaining piece of his Shizun soul. "Name?" The gatekeeper yawned, then lifted his eyes to look at Moran. Moran was just about to answer when the gatekeeper suddenly quivered, as if sensing that there was something off about this person, and abruptly stood up to stare intently at his face. ... Moran cursed in his mind. He had already died twice. Who knows if there was something odd about his soul from that? Even if not, he was currently holding a piece of someone else's soul in his arms, and that was just as questionable. But the ghost room had just this one entrance, so there was no other way about it. He could only brace himself and meet the gatekeeper's gaze directly. The gatekeeper narrowed his eyes. Moran feigned a calmness he didn't feel as he gave his name. Moran! The gatekeeper said nothing. Moran's heart thundered like a drum as he forced his expression to remain steady. I had a chi deviation and died just like that. I'd like an entry pass, please. End of chapter 105. Okay, guys, so to recap, Moran successfully manages to use the soul calling lantern to retrieve Shizun's soul, and he gets on the raft on his way to the underworld. So he passes by on this lake. He has to encounter a waterfall. He sees all the souls floating inside the water, and he makes it finally to the entrance of the underworld. He sees all manner of dead people, young and old, rich and poor, from all manners of life. And he sees that there's a gatekeeper there who is asking the reason for their death in order to give them a pass to enter. So Chuaning is scared because it's a really terrifying place, and also it takes really long to enter the cycle of reincarnation, apparently. You have to be judged by a Lord Judge first. And so Chuaning is a little bit worried, but Moran is protecting him in the lantern, so everything's gonna be okay. Don't worry, Shizun. And Moran says, I died from a chi deviation, and there's nothing wrong or weird about my soul. The fact that I may or may not have died twice before is irrelevant. And also, I am carrying a soul, but don't think twice about that. Nothing weird or wrong or abnormal here. So we'll have to see in the next chapter if the gatekeeper will buy his lie, or will he notice something is off and prohibit him from entering. That would be a bit of a roadblock for Moran. He really doesn't know what else to do. The monk only told him as far as getting on the raft. Everything else is up to Moran to kind of wing it, you know? He has no one to ask about how to deal with situations like this. He's gonna have to do the best he can. But I believe in him, and I believe that he will protect Chuaning's soul. That is his sole mission, and he has reinvigorated. You know what? He has renewed his passion to bring Shizun back, and that's all that matters. So, I hope you guys enjoyed today's read-along, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!